Let's go.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm your host, David Horsager. Join me as I sit down with influential leaders from around the world to discuss why leaders and organizations fail, top tactics for high performance, and how you can become an even more trusted leader. Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. It's David Horsager. I've got a special guest, a special friend. We're on a university board together. He is the CEO of Ardent Mills. He was with Cargill for 33 years, the biggest independently owned company, privately held company, I believe, in the world, for sure in the U.S. He was president of Horizon Milling. He was president of Cargill Ag Horizons U.S., a whole lot of other things. He is an amazing gentleman, a father, husband, and just a friend. He serves in his community, and I'm just grateful to know you as a friend. Please welcome Dan Dye.
Thanks, David. It's an honor to be on the show. I just so appreciate the work you're doing around trust and all the different aspects of that. It's making organizations better, making leaders better, making people better. So thanks. Privileged to be with you today.
Well, we'll get into leadership, Dan, and there's so much we could talk about in a short time together. But thinking about our audience, what are a couple things people don't know about Dan Dye, or they ought to know, or maybe you should just pull the curtain back and tell them?
Well, I've had the honor to be part of great organizations. You mentioned Cargill. I spent 33 years there. And then 8 years ago, we started Ardent Mills, which is a joint venture that Cargill has ownership in, along with Conagra Brands and CHS. So that's kind of a unique part of my journey. I've spent the last 8 years leading Ardent Mills, and we produce flour. So I, really enjoy baked goods. I'm a big fan of our products. We're now expanding into some other emerging nutrition space like quinoa and chickpeas. That's been really fun. So from a business standpoint or a career standpoint, I guess that's a little bit about me. I think other than that, I just, my faith, my family are really centered for me. That's really what drives and motivates me. And I just enjoy my work. I love the opportunity to be with our team. We have great team across Ardent Mills. And it's been a lot of fun being part of a new organization, a little later in your career, to be able to do that. So, I think, we won't pull the curtain back too far, but those are a few things, probably a little more on the professional side. But, personally, I'm a grandpa, and that's an incredible gift as well. So I have 2 young grandkids and enjoy that aspect as well of life.
Did I see this right? Because I'm going to jump into the journal you wrote in a little bit here, but do you still run kind of every day? Is that a big thing?
I do. I don't run every day. I'm getting a little old for that, but I still run or walk. I find for myself, it's a great way not only to just keep in shape and enable me to eat some of my great products that we make, but I find it to be a great place to listen to shows like yours or books on Audible on books and think and pray and just reflect on things, or just get a little time. And I think even during the pandemic, even more so, that's been helpful. So yeah, I used to play basketball quite a bit, even later into a number of years ago, but I've focused more running, walking, hiking, those kinds of things to get a little exercise and clear the mind.
That's good. I love to walk. When I was losing some weight a while back, that became a thing, kind of this weird thing of walking with weights. That's what the trainer had me doing. It was actually significant. That trainer believes that Nordic skiing or cross-country skiing is the best possible exercise. He coached like 53 national champion swim teams. So a lot of people think swimming is, and he himself said, even though he's a Southern California guy, he said, there's something great that happens when you get your hands above your heart. And so anyway, there you go. So before we get in a little bit deeper to your leadership, since we started on personal habits here, I found this to be true at least. You've got, what is it, about 2,300 employees? Is that right? Something like
about
that?
2,500. We've had a couple acquisitions, bought a couple new businesses, but about 2,500 across the U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico.
So Cargill was massive, but 2,500 employees, that's still significant. But I find that people like you that are leading the team well and certainly have led through a pandemic well, they're leading themselves well. So you still have this exercise piece. Anything you're doing personally, other just habits that we think, boy, that's been a significant habit for me to be able to lead well?
I think this reflection time, in addition to what I mentioned while running or walking, I try to spend a little just focused time of just kind of silence and prayer, reflection. And for me, again, I said that faith component's important. That's a really important starting point and habit for me. I find that it helps me to be others focused. It helps me to think a little bit differently, maybe about what's upcoming in the day, or a big challenge or an issue that I might be dealing with. I think that's been really important. The other thing I really try to do as much as I can is listen to and learn from other leaders. I just think there's so many great leaders out there, and there's some that aren't so good, so you can learn from that as well. But just trying to watch others lead, you can do that again through books and things. But I think often it's connecting in. Again, I found during the pandemic, I connected in with a few different leaders that I respected and kind of knew, but I just wanted to better learn from them during difficult times. And I think, sometimes we think we're kind of a little bit on an island, but the fact is there's a lot of folks out there leading different kinds of organizations, not just other businesses, even leaders in education, leaders in nonprofits, leaders in numerous different fields. That we can learn from each other. So I think that's another, personal habit I try to have, is constantly listening and talking to and learning from others.
I love that. I was just thinking, we just had a big, our Trusted Leader Summit, as you know, and I think the gift of what we get to do is we have got senators using this in government. We've got, police chiefs, you've got companies, you've got everything from, a John Deere type to a banking type to a schools to across industries and even pro sports teams. And it's like the cool thing that I get to back up and see and learn from is something that someone might have only thought of in agriculture, they could use in banking, and then this healthcare organization brings this idea, and so while our whole focus and expertise is around trust, how people apply it, we learn so much from each other, and just of course we know even about trust, something we're experts at. We know a sliver of monumental more to learn. But I love the idea of not just being stuck in. We've seen that in hospitals, especially where they've got just kind of hospital consultants that come in and they bring some other perspective, and it changes everything. Yeah, and you see that in industries that get just focused. So I want to jump to something here. One thing I got to remember, that this just popped in my head, of where we actually met decades ago and how that happened. I'm going to keep that a secret. I wasn't even thinking about it, but I'm going to try to remember to come back to that at the end. Everybody can listen for that little surprise at the end. Before we get there, though, we were talking through this, pandemic, through the crisis. And by the way, people that think, the pandemic's over, or they think crisis is over, I just think they're dead wrong. There's so much change going to be had. I'm not saying the pandemic isn't coming to an end. I am saying if we don't learn how to deal with crisis, there's more ahead in the next decade. Blockchain is going to throw our country and world for a loop if we're not ready for it. There are other fast-changing crisis type events that are going to happen, and we have to get good at dealing with more rapid change. And I think you wrote something. I was very impressed by it. It was almost like journaling to your people. You called it Leading Through Crisis. You let me have a look at it. It's basically like journal entries, it seems like, every day as you were going through the pandemic. Very inspiring, very valuable. Tell us where that came from and what happened. Your first entry was March 14th, 2020.
Yeah, no, I find that, like you said, leading through crisis it kind of culminated here in the pandemic and put everybody in that situation, right? But I think you are exactly right. This is not over. I mean, just even recently, we've had the war in Ukraine. We are facing, a lot of change from a lot of different angles. So to think that we'll get through the pandemic and things will calm is, I think, false thinking right now. I mean, there's going to be one crisis or another, and just the amount of change we face. So when we first, made the decision to close our offices and everyone was going to work remote, it was Friday the 13th that happened. And on Saturday morning, March 14th, I was out for a run, and I kept thinking in my mind, man, I've got to really be thoughtful about how to lead. This is different. You don't go take a course on leading through the next pandemic and figure it out, right? It was thrust upon us. In our business, we had this massive, all of a sudden, demand for our products. People were baking at home. They were taking, flour was gone off the shelves. The bread was gone. Our customers were saying, hey, we need more flour. I mean, it was just a massive shift in a very short period of time. And I remember thinking, hey, I know I have to think about how I'm going to lead differently during this time. And these words kept, and I'm a list guy, and you've kind of come to see that. So, I had this list of words that started with C, and it was about, man, we've got to be calm. We've got to be consistent. We got to make sure we have compassion for our people, because this is going to be hard, and all those things. So I had these 5 C's that I wrote down and came to.
They're almost like our 8 trust pillars,
they're
by the way.
Similar. They're very similar. And so, I started that on that Saturday and just said, hey, these are things that we need to lead. Their learnings I'm thinking about personally. I just wanted to share them. So I shared it with my leadership team. And then actually it was every week for the first 15 weeks of the pandemic. I had a new list. I challenged myself to a different letter. So I got through. I've probably done about 5 since then, but the first 15 weeks, it was every week, because it was just, things were changing so rapidly. And so, each week I was thinking about what I was learning and what I needed to do different as a leader. And I just wanted to share it. Like you said, it kind of became journaling. It was one of the ways I was managing and coping. And again, learning from others as I'd have conversations. And, I just remember one time, one of the weeks, it was probably in week 12 or 13 or somewhere. I don't know. It was along the journey a little, but I just kept thinking, man, this is a tough time. And I had a few H's in my mind, and it was all of a sudden that was right for that moment. It was hope. It was help. It was healing. Those kinds of things would just kind of think things I had to focus on as a leader leading through crisis. So it turned into, I think there's been about 20 of them. I haven't shut the door on it yet, because we're not done yet, I guess. But, in fact, my most recent one was around the journey, Jay's, the journey we're on.
I just have that in front of me. The journey, join, just, juice, and joy.
Yeah. It was, how do we keep the juice? How do we keep the energy going? How do we join together, not split apart? How do we do what's just and what's right? Because as you pointed out earlier, David, we're in the midst of a lot of different crises going on throughout these last couple of years, and that will continue. And the last one of those was finding joy in this journey. As hard as it is, there's learnings, there's silver linings, there's positive things happening. And we tried to really make sure in our organization, we kept people feeling, hey, you're doing really good work. You're helping to feed people. You're helping to manage through this crisis and making a difference in other people's lives. Find joy in that and helping each other, all those different things. So that was kind of how that came about. It was my way of trying to learn and trying to develop myself as a leader, knowing this was new ground. And it just kind of ended up being this flow of, like you said, journals, things I wrote out, and that's
it needs to be a book. It needs to be a book. I love it. I think it's powerful. But I think what you did is when I saw the thread through it, you taught, but you also gave vision. Like, here's where we're headed now. Oh, we need healing with our people now. Oh, we need hope. We got to come on, leaders. And you're writing it to your SLT, senior leadership team, the whole time. Hey, this is where we're headed. This is what we're about. This is what we need to be thinking about. And I think if people would have done this, I think it's a huge takeaway for others that keep mentoring your keep sharing vision with your team, keeping coming with different angles. The other thing that made me think of is, I don't know how many times on this show I asked some of the greatest leaders in the world, what's a habit that has just been, important to you? And people will say, I'll say, what's that personal habit that makes you a better leader? What's the thing you're doing off stage that makes you better on stage, right? And you will hear many people say, well, health. They are on top of their health. They go for a run or walk, like you said. They'll say, I keep my home life like with my, family or faith or whatever. But one thing, I can't tell you how many times those people have said journaling. Yeah. And I feel like this right here is like you're journaling with a little bias to sharing. Like you're journaling what's happening, but a little bit in your mind, it just seems to be going to, and how could this help them? It was so relevant. I could see as you threaded through all these different, in essence, journal entries, how even, there was a time when, yes, we always need healing, but in that moment, we really needed hope, let's say. In that moment, we really needed this. But how did the journaling process change you?
I think it was a lot of reflection. It is a bit of a habit. I'm not like a very conscious like journaler just in general. I do a little bit of that. I've done more later in life. But what I do, and a habit of mine is if I'm in a really tough situation, pre-pandemic, a tough personnel decision, for example, or maybe a key strategic decision that needs to be made in the business, my way of managing through that is I get sit down with the computer or write down on and just process in words. And that really helps me to think through all different sides of things and so forth. So when I was doing this, it was helping me by processing, my different emotions, my challenges, because, you'll see in there's, one of the V's was vulnerability. And I was feeling vulnerable at times. And I remember, that this was a learning process for me. And I found out I was, I would end up sending that out to, my kids and, other business leaders that I had been, in contact with who were going through their own journeys, and they'd share stuff back with me. And so it really helped me reflect on my own leadership journey so that I could be a better leader for my team, but just a better leader overall. And I think sometimes for me, the power of words, the importance of words, and I can be a little too wordy sometimes, but it helps me to process. It helps me to, think through the different circumstances, different things people are going through, and then try to capture that. And that's one of the habits that I have, that I think is helpful for me anyway, to come to grips with, okay, here's what I'm really thinking and feeling. How do I express that? And then how can I lead better as a result of that?
Most training and development initiatives don't last or even solve the root problem hindering an organization. That's where TrustEdge certification comes in. TrustEdge certified partners are equipped with a suite of tools to identify, benchmark, and close gaps in trust for good. Because when you solve the real issue, you get measurable results and a culture where people actually want to make an impact. So whether you're a trainer, a manager, an HR executive, or a leader in learning and development, check out trustedgeplatform.com and see how you can start solving the root issue and get lasting results in your organization. And now back to the show.
What did you see happen? Because I saw you, I read about, talking about a little bit this power of vulnerability, but what did you notice the more you were vulnerable, or what did you notice around some of that vulnerability? Being vulnerable as a CEO, a lot of us say, oh, we got to keep like this. We got to look like the CEO. But you kind of push the boundary on that. What did you notice?
I found that during the pandemic, it was really important to be very personal. And so as you saw in there were several very personal. For example, I had my W's. One of them was wisdom, and it happened to be Father's Day week. And my father, who recently passed away, was big influence on me, but he was still alive at the time. And I shared a very personal story of my dad and his influence on me and my leadership in there. And I found in the pandemic that people wanted that vulnerability and personal touch because they were feeling things, and people were having challenges at work, but they were also having challenges at home. Mm-hmm. And they were dealing with their team that were having challenges and trying to figure things out. Whether that was at our plants where, 80% of our people worked at a plant they went to work every day. They didn't never have a option to work remotely, right? We had to produce flour. We had to keep food on people's tables. So I found that being personal, being vulnerable, that opened the door. And I would start to hear stories from my leadership team about how they had connected with some of their teams, and they had opened up a little bit about what they were going through. And I give a huge amount of credit to one of my leaders on our leadership team. And I'm not saying that this series of things helped to do that, but it was part, I think, of his processing. But he talked about, hey, I had to take a pause, and I had to get some support and utilize some counseling and some help. For a senior leader to come out and be willing to say that, and he was willing to say it in the organization so that then others would take away some of that stigma that, hey, this is hard. This isn't easy to go through this, and we're all kind of going through that. So I think that was probably the most important change or thing that I saw shift was others were willing to be a little more vulnerable as well. And then it opened up more conversation. Our senior leadership team, for the first month or so, we were having crisis meetings every single day, for an hour. So we were together more, even though it was remote, more than we normally would be by far. And it really brought an intimacy and a sense, because we were also in each other's homes. We were, for the most part, working remotely initially. And so we were going through this together. So I think that vulnerability really can draw that personal side out, which I think is so important.
I wonder if it really was like a lot of people say, well, the pandemic, we really need to be personal. I wonder if we haven't needed to be more, period, or if it would make a difference anytime. I do think there is a move, certainly there's a move in companies to be more human in many ways, throughout the pandemic and beyond. But I wonder if some of these things, I guess, are there any takeaways for you that you're like, pandemic or not, we kept meeting together more as a team because we noticed that helped, or what was a learning that you kept with us that doesn't matter if we go out, beyond the pandemic, but in the midst of the world we're in?
Yeah, definitely. I think one would be this willingness to just be open. And like you said, this more personal side, and keeping that going, staying closer in touch with your team, even when you get beyond it. I'll tell you the other thing, David, and I hope this does stick. I hope it's getting a lot of attention, but I think it's so important. And that was how we look at our plant workers, how we look at what we called essential workers. And I'll never forget, one of our team members spoke. We had some of our essential workers that have been working in our plant speak to one of our leadership meetings here a year or so ago. And they talked about having that piece of paper that they carried in those first few weeks that said they were allowed to be on the road because they worked at a flour mill, and they had to be there because it was an essential critical infrastructure industry job that they had, and how proud they were of that. And even though they knew they were taking risk and it was hard and they had to wear masks and they had to do all these new things, they did it. And I think, to your question, my hope is, and my belief is, that we need to treat these essential workers like essential workers long after the pandemic. And we have to make sure that we recognize that people do the work, right? In organizations, we have to treat our people the right way. And I know at Ardent Mills, we talk about really focusing on having a people-first, values-based culture. And that's really amplified in the pandemic. And I believe will amplify even further going forward, because we've seen the value and the importance of everyone in the company, right? Whether you're working remote in a plant or whatever, we all have to work together. We talk a lot about together we make Ardent Mills. And so we really, I think, have learned that we have to treat people well, no matter what, right? Before the pandemic,
what does that look like?
Now going forward.
Give me a specific, like, this is what that people first actually looks like. What's that look like today?
I think I'll give you a very specific example. For the first time ever, we closed all of our mills on Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day this last year. We normally run 24/7, pretty much 365, and some mills maybe are a bit, and other than maybe a few volunteers, because we had some critical things, we were able to do that because we said, you people need a break. Our team members are so valued. Another thing that we did was we did some appreciation pay things long after it was kind of popular at the beginning of the pandemic. We did one recently, and again, it just shows that reinforcement. But I think most importantly, it's how you treat people day in and day out, and really, showing you care about people and how we treat them. And I've had people tell me, this is different than any other organization I've worked for because of how I'm treated. I feel valued as a person. So, those are some things that we do. I could go on because I think we really try to bring our values to life. One of our values, by the way, is trust, as you know. And so we really try to bring those values to life: trust, serving, simplicity, and safety, and make them real. And we put safety first. That's another way I'd say, because we tell people your safety is more important than our profitability. It's more important than the production metrics at the plant. It's more important than anything we do. We want our people to be safe, and because we want to put people first.
I love it. Let's take a jump here, because I think it's really interesting how you have thought about in your life, and certainly in this position, about partnership and collaboration. I mean, you've got this, you think of, these kind of competitors in ways, or, you got CHS and ConAgra and Cargill. And I mean, that's quite a conglomerate to put together to make this thing called Ardent Mills, or to have partial ownership to different, different significant organizations. Tell me how that came to be, and then what do you think, just quickly, that we can take away as far as thinking differently in the future about partnership?
Yeah, I think partnership is just so important. When we try to do things on our own, independent, you miss opportunity to learn, to grow, to develop. Obviously, in a competitive landscape that we all face in the business world, you have to manage around that. But I think in partnership, Ardent Mills is a great example of that, to your point. So it really came about with a desire for both organizations to commit and grow even in the flour milling space, but recognizing to really drive innovation and change, there was actually value of doing that together as one organization versus two different organizations. And so the partnership idea kind of came out of, hey, this is kind of a unique way that we could grow, help serve our customers better, which we're going through a lot of consolidation, recognize that the trends in our business, flour demand is relatively flat. Can we find different ways to be innovative and change? And really, partnerships, I think, can help really drive innovative and new ways of thinking. So, we came with that, with the joint ventures where it landed, and it's really been exciting and successful. I mean, they're very different owners, and yet we have a great board. We have a great, business that works well together with all of our parent companies and has business relationship with all of them, which is kind of unique as well. So CHS, we buy a large amount of wheat from them. ConAgra is a very important flour customer. Cargill, we have a lot of customers we go to market together with. So there's just a lot of different ways we work together. And I think that shows the power and the strength of partnership.
Really strong and very unique. How did you deal with, a lot of the organizations we work with, they're going through an acquisition or a merger, and they're trying to put two cultures together and they're trying to keep trust or build trust. We're one of the biggest pharmaceuticals in the world we're working with right now, and you get a global pharmaceutical and you're putting two almost the same size together. Significant challenges and opportunities with the merger, especially of culture. What do you do to create one strong culture with all the different voices in the heads of your board and partners? What have you done? Because it seems like a pretty strong culture.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate that we had actually a little extra time to do integration work, because the time from the Department of Justice approval process, which was painful, but the positive part of it was it gave us a little more time to think about integration. And one of the things we did right from the start was we established our values. We established a vision, a mission for Ardent Mills that would be unique. We didn't use words from the parent companies. We used our own words. Another thing we did was we established Denver as our corporate headquarters. That gave us a sense of everyone kind of moved, that was going to be in the corporate headquarters had to move there and come together and be a part of that. Obviously, a lot more remote today, but at that time, a lot of people moved to Denver. That helped give us a cultural identity as an organization of where we were together, and it brought us, in this excitement of something new and so forth. But I think those values really set the tone. And one thing you'll appreciate this story. One of our values, the first value we established, was trust. And one of the things, it was a bit of a mantra that we had in that integration planning, because we were direct competitors, going into this. And so we had to, like you said, bring different constituencies, different mindsets, different cultures together to create this new culture. And our mantra became trust on day one. And we said, we know that on, May 28th of 2014, we're competitors. And May 29th of 2014, we're supposed to be one happy family. We know the only way that we can do that is to have trust. And we have to assume positive intent. We have to have trust across the organization. And really driving that value at the very beginning, I think really helped us create culture that would be our culture and have that trust for this new organization. And I think that those values have served us so well. And I talked, like I said earlier, people first, values-based culture. And so establishing our values and then driving those deep in the organization. We've done some other things. We've brought in some leadership principles that bring the values to be more behavior-based. We now have what we call our promise, which is really, again, makes it more personal and intimate around our values. But those things have really helped to shape that culture, to have a brand new company with our own identity. In fact, we're just now launching some new work around our branding, around being ardent. And ardent, the word itself, is about passion and energy and excitement. And so building on that brand as a new organization, and now building on it even further 8 years later.
I love it. What are you curious about these days? What are you learning now? What's new?
I think there's so much change like we talked about earlier. I think for me, it's trying to stay out of the immediacy of the pressures of today and really start to think about some of those future realities that are going to be with us a little bit further down the road. So I think having really thinking about how organizations are changing. I think one of the things that's new that I think will not be a very simple and easy one that I'm trying to learn about now is this whole different way of working. If you think about remote work for us, like I said, about 80% of our people work in a plant, but 20% work in an office setting or whatever. And we've gone with a pretty much a hybrid approach where we've got a lot more flexibility. And I've read a lot and studied a lot and thought a lot about what's the impact of this on culture, and there's some people that say, hey, if you're not all physically together, your culture is going to be diminished. It's going to be hurt, destroyed. And I've said, how do we actually strengthen our culture through this new way of working? How do we let people know we care so much for them that we're going to let them have some flexibility in their personal lives and work maybe from somewhere else or whatever, but we're all going to be in this together, working towards the same goals and outcomes, but doing it in different ways. And so trying to learn about some of this, I think, is really fascinating. And it's so different from when the pandemic hit, when we were forced to work remote, boom, overnight. And so we had to adjust. Now it's been this slow, painful process of trying to figure out what you're going to look like in the future. And it's going to be very different. So I've been trying to learn all I can about that and really understand. But actually, my commitment is we're going to strengthen our culture through this. Even though we're hybrid and we're not all together in the same ways, we actually can add to our culture in different ways.
I'm excited to come back and hear what you've tried that's worked, because this is a big question for the leaders I'm talking to. It's like, how do you keep trust or build it remotely?
Yep.
We have this balance between, accountability that we feel like we've lost in certain ways with caring for employees and employees feeling cared about in the midst of being gone, enough connectedness, enough accountability, in some cases, results only hasn't worked as well as people thought, and yet it gave some legs to being able to trust people remotely, and it's a big mix.
It is, and it's not an easy one, like you said. I wish there's a formula, right? But there isn't, and each organization is going to be different. But I think we have to be together some, right? I mean, there's so much value in those personal connections. It's finding those right balances and ways to do it differently and so forth. I mean, before the pandemic, we had a number of people that worked remote. We had people that traveled a lot. You found ways to connect. We have to just reinvent and continue to learn. And we know we'll have to change and adjust as we go.
Yeah. I love that about the way you do it. Do you have a favorite book or resource? How do you stay fresh as a leader? How do you stay relevant?
Well, kind of the best source and resource for me is the Bible. I find great principles there, but I love business books. I love new ways of thinking. I listen to a lot of books. I like your work. I like if you think about people, Simon Sinek and others, and talk about the infinite game, or some of Patrick Lencioni's work and different ones that do different things about thinking about business in a little bit different way than just the nuts and the bolts of it, right? And so I really like to read about culture and organizations that are successful, and leaders that are successful, and just better understand all I can. So I really enjoy Jim Collins' work. I actually had a chance to meet him here recently at a conference I was at that he spoke at, and I really liked Built to Last originally, and then Good to Great and his other work. And those have been ones that I think earlier in my leadership journey were very impactful and very helpful. And I still draw on some of that today. And he continues to refresh in some of his work. So those are a few examples of things that I try to stay abreast of. And there's so much out there. It's just trying to learn as much as you can.
Curate it down to what's the bite-sized piece for today. Well,
yes.
everybody can find out more about Ardent Mills, the great organization, ardentmills.com. We'll put it in the show notes, trustedleadershow.com. We'll link you up just so you can see what he's up to on his public LinkedIn. There you'll find more about Dan Dye if you want to. And we're so grateful that you could be on, share, inspire. There's so much more to you and so much more to all that you've done and are doing. And I'm just grateful for that. And grateful that we get to serve together. I get to see you once in a while being on the board together and host of other things. So we always finish with this question, Dan. It's the show, Trusted Leader Show. Who is a leader you trust and why?
I'm really blessed to have been around a lot of great leaders. But one leader that I just will call out just because that level of trust is a guy, Greg Page. He's a former CEO of Cargill. He just was a great leader that I trusted. It was at different times in my career that I could look to him. He was the CEO at the time we created Ardent Mills. So, that trust I had to have in him as we made that change. And he's been a great influence. And I would also say, and I don't know if it's fair to have two, but my dad was just such a great trusted person that he wasn't in the business world. And yet I learned so much about trusting other people, about leadership, about caring for and loving other people and how important that is in everything that we do. And so, if I had to only have one, it'd be my dad, but Greg would be one from the business world that was just a great leader, someone I trust and has helped me to learn to be a better leader.
Two great examples. As you know, my dad has been a huge role in my life. And you hear about leaders today, great leaders, their dad is often either was really great or really not great. And they learned something in either case. I'm grateful to have one. As I say, it wasn't my fault that I had a great dad, but grateful for that. We usually end on that, but I did just remember where I should have really started, and that is way back when I was in college, I came out to interview at Cargill. I didn't know what I was doing, clearly. I kind of got thrown. They said, you can come out and do this. I didn't know what the job was for, hardly. I was not prepared well. But I did did get invited into your office to shake hands and say hello. You were already a vice president. And that was the first time I believe we met. And that was at Cargill. And as you know, my older brother worked at Cargill. And he's 11 years my senior. Yep. But I think the first time I met, you were kind enough to, take me out of the interview for a second and say hi and connect. And I think that was my first kind of real interview, which I didn't really actually probably prepared enough or know I was doing, but it was a treat and you were very kind. And that was back at Cargill days. Yeah,
that's good. Good memories. And I remember your brother Kent and working with him for a number of years. And then when he was at the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, that connection with your family goes back a long, long way. So you have a good memory to remember that specific moment, which is great. Yeah.
He was my first internship, Kent was. And you talk about another great leader, and I don't, shout out to him too much. There's some, he's, I've got 5 siblings and I'm the youngest, but he is a great leader and was a great leader. And I learned a ton. My first internship, my sophomore year of college, was on the floor of the Minneapolis Commodity Exchange.
Cool.
And so learned a whole lot. There's a whole lot more here. Dan Dye, president of Ardent Mills, and just grateful for your work and all that you do. Thanks for being on the show. That has been the Trusted Leader Show. Until next time, stay trusted.